These are my top 5 biggest underperforming teams so far this season. In today's video, I have created a list of 5 teams that, in my opinion, have really dropped down a level from where they were playing at last season. I'm not necessarily saying that each of these teams is having a horrible season, but compared to where they finished last season, they have started off the season fairly poorly, and that is why I would have put them on this list. So without further ado, let's get right into this video. And coming in at 5th place, we head over into the Serie A, and I'm going to be talking about Lazio. Lazio, in my opinion, have always been a very inconsistent team. They can go ahead and beat the best teams in the Serie A, Napoli, Milan, Inter, Juve, but then the next game they can lose against the worst team. I don't know why that is, but they're just always so inconsistent. In terms of how Lazio have started off the season, honestly, it hasn't been great. In their first 2 games, they lost against Lecce and Genoa, which are 2 bottom tier Serie A teams. But then in the game after, they faced Napoli at home and they destroyed them. So again, this comes back to my point of Lazio being such an inconsistent team, where they can lose the first 2 games against bottom tier Serie A teams, then they can destroy Napoli at home, then they can lose against Juve. It's so strange how their results can vary so much from game to game. It's crazy. Now currently Lazio sit in 13th place. They have played 8 games, they've only won 3 of them, they've drawn 1, and they lost the other 4 games. They have a -2 goal difference, and they currently have 10 points on the board. So to be fair, it hasn't been a atrocious start. They have still gotten a few wins, they also got a draw, but compared to how they performed last season, where they finished 2nd place in the Serie A for the first time in a pretty long time, honestly, I consider this start pretty poor. Coming in at 4th place, we head over to the Bundesliga, and I've put Union Berlin. Union Berlin are obviously not a very popular Bundesliga team because throughout the last decade, to be honest, for most of the last decade, they have been playing in the 2nd division in Germany, and it was only a few years ago where they got promoted into the Bundesliga. But this season, honestly, has really been a drop-off from how they've been performing the last few seasons. Union Berlin actually started off the season pretty good because they won their first 2 Bundesliga games, but since those first 2 games, they have lost every single game they've played. Whether it's in the Bundesliga, whether it's in the Champions League, they've lost their last 7 games. They're currently on a 7-game losing streak, and honestly, that is horrible form for a team that is again trying to finish in the top 4. Union Berlin currently sit 13th place in the Bundesliga. They've played 7 games, they've won 2 of them. Like I already said, they won their first 2, but since then, every single game has been a loss. They currently have a goal difference of -3, and they only have 6 points on the board. Honestly, it's been a really rough start for Union Berlin. This start is really surprising to me because in the summer, Union Berlin brought in some incredible players: Brandon Aronson, Robin Gosens, Kevin Vollen, Leonardo Bonucci, and they even brought in David Detro Fofana from Chelsea on loan. So with all these new transfers, I thought they were going to have an incredible start to the season, but in fact, it's been the opposite. They've lost their last 7 games, and honestly, they need to step it up soon if they want a chance to even sniff the top 4. Moving on into 3rd place, and in my opinion, this is where we see a big drop off in form. And in 3rd place, I've put Lens. Everyone remembers Lens for how good of a season they had last year in the Liga, and they finished in 2nd place, only a few points behind PSG. And honestly, they even had a few chances to win the title. And for a team like Lens, who have been in the Ligue 2 for most of the last decade, this was an incredible finish. But this season, honestly, it's been a rough start to say the least. In their first 5 games of the Liga season, they couldn't get a single win. Now, to be fair, they were facing pretty tough opponents, teams like Monaco, PSG, Brest, but for a team that finished 2nd place in the Liga last season, and pretty convincingly, they should have at least won a few of these games. Now, since those first few games, they have started to pick up their form a little bit, winning 2 games in the Liga. Obviously, in the Champions League, they did win against Arsenal, which pretty much surprised everyone. But it doesn't change the fact that this start to the season has been horrible for Lens. One thing that I think is really having a big effect on Lens this season is that they've lost 2 key players from their team from last season, Seko Fofana and Llouis Openda, a striker and a midfielder that were really key players in their title charge last season. And I think this has had a big effect because those players were role models to the team. They were the main players, the stars of that team. And when you lose your 2 stars, even if you buy players in the summer to try and replace them, they can never do the same job as obviously those players did last season. And I do think that this has been negatively affecting Lens so far. Before we move on to the next team, I want to quickly mention that Lens currently sit 14th place in the Ligue 1. They've played 8 games, they've won 2 of them, they've drawn 2 of them, and the other 4 games have all been losses. They currently have a goal difference of -5 and they have 8 points on the board. Honestly, if Lens want to try and finish where they did, or even close to where they did last season, they need to pick up their form real soon. Moving on into second place, in my opinion, the second most underperforming team in the world right now, and it is Ajax. Ajax are having a horrible season, to say the least. They have already played 6 games in the Eredivisie, and they've only won 1 singular game. They've drawn 2 of them, and the other 3 games have all been losses. They have a goal difference of -4, and they only have 5 points currently. That is a horrible start. In my opinion, one big reason why they are struggling this season is because they did change their manager from last season. I don't know why they did that. I'm not sure, but this will always have a negative effect on your team when you change your manager from season to season, and it will always take time to adjust. But in this adjusting period, you have to play better than this, because this is honestly unacceptable. But to be fair to Ajax, they have lost a lot of key players from last season. They lost Dusan Tadic, Jurrien Timber, Calvin Bassey, Edson Alvarez, Mohamed Kudus, the list goes on. They lost a lot of important players, but they should have invested this money better. They didn't really buy any replacements for these players. Obviously, they bought a few replacements, but not to the level of the players that they sold. And this, in my opinion, is the biggest reason on why they're having such a horrible start. And finally, we have reached number 1, in my opinion, the biggest underperforming team in football this season, and it is Olympique Lyon. Lyon have had a horrific start to the Ligue 1 campaign. They currently sit 17th place. They are second last, and out of the first 8 games, they have won 0 of them. They haven't even won a single game yet out of the first 8 games. They've drawn 3 of them, and the other 5 games have all been losses. And what makes this even worse is that their goal difference is horrible. They have the worst goal difference in the Ligue 1 with -10. They've scored only 6 goals so far this season, and they've conceded 16 goals in their first 8 games, and they only have 3 points. Like, what else is there to say? That sums up Lyon's performances so far this season. And obviously, the Lyon fans are embarrassed, because if you guys remember, about a month ago, the fans had that long chat with Lyon after their disgusting game, telling them that this is not what they want to see. They're not happy with how they're playing. There's no passion. And I honestly thought that this would change Lyon's attitude coming into their next games, but it hasn't changed a thing. They're still losing almost every game they play. Their attack, their midfield, their defense is horrible. They're leaking goals everywhere. And honestly, I don't even know what can fix them this season. To make things even worse, they have already sacked their manager so far this season and brought in a new manager, but clearly he's not doing any better of a job. It doesn't look like Lyon are gonna win any game in the future. Like, I don't know what it is, but they just can't win a game. Even if the player's life depended on it, they can't win a single game. And we might be seeing them in the Ligue 2 next season, which would be very sad, because I want to see Lyon succeed. But honestly, it just doesn't look like that's gonna happen this season. And that is the end of my video where I talked about the top 5 underperforming teams so far this season. Let me know if I have missed any teams that have had a horrible start to this season. And as for these teams, I do hope that they can all improve their form, but currently it just doesn't look good for any of them. If you guys want to see me do the same style of video, but with the top 5 biggest overperforming teams so far this season, let me know in the comments down below. But for now, if you guys did enjoy this video, remember to leave a like, comment, subscribe, all that good stuff, and stay tuned for more videos.